Welcome back, Dice fans, for your continued coverage of the 2019 Dice Masters National Championship. It's me, Ross, from the Weekly Dice Arena, with our continued coverage of the 2019 Origins Game Fair Nationals. We are jumping into the second round of Swiss. We're going to be watching a game of two of my favorite players. I play with them often. Trey versus Michael. It's going to be a great bout. Let's jump in and see what they're playing. Trey's team first. We open it up, and the first thing that catches my eye is this Atlantis here. We've seen this in past tournaments be a super explosive tool. For those that don't know, it is when you field a sidekick die, you get to draw and roll 2 more dice, which is wild. Wild. I've seen this happen when paired with this Black Widow that gives everything +1 attack that's already in the field. So you can have turns of fielding sidekicks, buffing them all up, and you start the turn with no kind of wall, and then you end the turn with 5 sidekicks in the field that are all like +4/+4. It is interesting, and when it works, it works. Let's see some other pieces here. Captain America, I imagine, going to be used mainly for the global. It does buff sidekicks as well, but I imagine we'll see that just as the global. Clayface also for the global. Supreme Intelligence, which we haven't seen a whole lot of yet, but the global on Supreme Intelligence says pay 2 generics. You may move a die of cost 2 or less from your used pile to your prep. So it's going to be a really fast way for Trey to either keep his Atlantises rolling. He's going to be getting Black Widows every turn, or he even has some Yan Ts down here for some extra, grit in the field. Shriek for some control, Scarlet Witch for some control. He is using Create Food and Water, which again the global is going to ensure that he has something in his used pile, which is important for Clayface, as well as Captain America global, etc. Haymaker, sort of a win more card I feel like on this team, but the global could be important if he misses some of these Black Widow rolls. He could be using those fists later on for Haymaker. Pretty cool team. I actually tested against this team before Nats, and again, when it rolls and when it hits super hard. So I wish Trey all the best of the rolls. Let's jump in to see what Michael's playing. Let the doors open, and we see the star of the show here, Hope Summers, sort of a up-and-comer in the meta. Most recently, she will assume the text of a target X-Men character card on your team. So in this case, Hope is going to be copying Boom Boom's text. So essentially, you have 2 copies of Boom Boom in the field. She could also copy on this team, though, Bishop, which would be super great if you're against one of those Atom spin-up teams or something that does some really heavy direct damage. Bishop is a great target. She could also become Mimic, which we haven't seen a whole lot of this card yet, but I feel like it's only a matter of time until somebody really breaks this card and it gets wild. So we'll see if Michael's the one to do it. But I imagine the core of the combo is going to be Hope Summers copying Boom Boom, which effectively, when he would use a thrown brick or another action, it is going to deal 4 damage to the opponent. So it really adds up quickly. Again, that super quick burst damage straight to the opponent's face is pretty wild. I will say both of these teams are a little more one-dimensional than maybe our first round games, but I think they do what they're supposed to do very well. So it's just going to be who gets their combo out first, who can get it triggering and rolling at the right time in the right place. Again, 2 guys that I love playing with. I wish them both the best of luck. We're going to jump straight into the game. We'll see you guys over there. So it looks like Trey has won the roll-off. He's going to be going first, which I think for his team is very advantageous. I imagine he wants to buy an Atlas. Sorry, he wants to buy an Atlantis, Clayface it, and buy another Atlantis. It's not going to happen this turn, though. Did not get the mask required for Clayface. He could buy an Atlantis and have a fist left for Atlas Global, which maybe is... he said this is bad. I feel like, not a terrible roll. The fist, again, with the Atlantis Global... Sorry, with the Atlas Global cannot be that bad. He's going to do Scarlet Witch instead. Going to go for the counterplay on Michael's team. He knows it's going to be an action-heavy team, so Scarlet Witch going to be super important. Michael rolls his 4 dice. Fist, fist, question mark, bolt. Trying to think what his first purchase. Probably going to be Hope Summers here because, again, the characters that she targets do not need to be in the field necessarily before she gets fielded. So she can assume another card text before that card is even in the field. He bought a thrown brick. Clay faced it over, bought another thrown brick. Has a fist chilling. Could use it for Atlas Global. But as for now, it looks like he is done with his stuff. Gonna end his turn. Slides it all to the use pile. Trey's gonna roll 4. Let's see what he does. I assume he'd love... There we go. There's a shield and a mask, which is really going to be important here for purchasing 2 Atlantis. He'd also love to Atlas here because then he can... There's nothing in his bag currently, so he can put a limited number of things in his bag instead of all of these sidekicks from this turn. Clay faces the Atlantis. Purchases another. Create food and water. Hopes he draws a sidekick here to put in the use pile. He does not. Puts it back in his bag instead. And passes turn to Michael. Sort of a slow start for both teams here. Not necessarily great rolls for either side. I feel like Michael got done what he wanted to get done on turn 1. Trey still sort of treading. He does have 1 Atlantis in the bag and Scarlet Witch, which is good news. Ideally, he'd rather pull Atlantis plus 3 sidekicks next turn instead of a Scarlet Witch. Michael, 2 question marks, a bolt, and a mask. He buys a Shriek. Gonna Atlas Global and put his used pile in his bag and draw 1. To prep for next turn. Over to Trey. Again, I think best draw here is Atlantis plus 3 sidekicks. 4 sidekicks instead, though. Swing and a miss. Which is actually pretty poor for Trey because that leaves a Scarlet Witch and less sidekicks in his bag with that Atlantis. Two sidekicks, fist, question mark rolled for Trey. Doesn't like anything but the question mark. Goes for a reroll, no more sidekicks. 4 energy to spend. Is it time to start forking over the cash for all of these Black Widows? I assume that's the next buy. But with that Supreme Intelligence Global, he could pay 2 generic to move that Atlantis to the prep. He could also use that mask to Clayface the Atlantis in on 2 shields to get him up to 5 energy. Trey's team not super dependent on buying anything that's really above a 3 cost. So, what does he do with 5? All these shields not super helpful at this point. Does purchase 1 Black Widow with a fist and a shield. Used a shield and a question mark for Yanti. Deciding what to do with this last shield. He could use the Create Food and Water Global, but I think he took a peek into his bag and realized he kind of wants everything that's in there. Michael pulls his for a Shriek and a lot of sidekicks. Shriek, super important piece. It effectively blanks a card on your opponent's team when she's fielded, and it stays blanked until she leaves the field. Let's see what Michael chooses to blank on Trey's team. The good news for Trey is that he's bought 3 important pieces so far. He's bought the Black Widow, the Yanti, and Atlantis, and Scarlet Witch. So there's lots of targets that are all, you know, decent choices here for Michael. There's not really a bad choice. Scarlet Witch gets shrieked. Trey cocks his card to the side, taps her out, and says, "You are blank," until Shriek leaves the field. Michael preps a die for next turn. It is a thrown brick. All right, attacks with 2 sidekicks. Trey losing first blood down to 18. They go unblocked to the use pile. Trey's turn. He has Atlantis and Scarlet Witch. He'd love to get 2 sidekicks here with this Atlantis. Especially with nothing in his use pile, it's going to be really hard to trigger sidekicks with the Captain America Global. He does get a sidekick, so he'd really like Atlantis here. He does get it. The fish. The fish rolls. Trey plays Atlantis. He's going to field a sidekick, draw and roll 2. He'd love to get another sidekick here. Not happening right now, though. But the fist is important. I feel like he'd like to buy more Black Widows this turn. Fielding Scarlet Witch is not ultimately, you know, a make it or break it right now since she is blanked. Trey also has a blocker in the field, so nothing, you know, real crazy is going to get through unblocked. He does pay a bolt, though, to field her. Fairly reasonable body in terms of stats for a 3 cost. Little Scarlet Witch. Trey passes over to Michael. He's done all he can this turn. Michael pulls 4 from the bag. 2 of them, well, 1 thrown brick from the prep area. Neither one rolls on the initial roll. He's going for the full Monty here. And flips them both over to action side on his reroll. Definitely more the direction he was headed. Thrown brick at this point in the game for Michael is simply for ramp. He's going to ping this Scarlet Witch probably with the damage, and he's going to prep thrown brick as well as another die until he gets Boom Boom or Hope Summers assuming Boom Boom's text in the field. The attune doesn't really matter. Or sorry, until he gets those attune characters in the field, using these actions. You know, the 1 damage from those actions doesn't matter much. There we go. The first damage is directed towards Scarlet Witch. And I assume the second one as well. So until the end of turn, Scarlet Witch is down 2 defense. And because neither of those damages killed Scarlet Witch, Michael gets to prep an additional die for each thrown brick. He also Atlas Globals, so he has prepped 5 dice for next turn. Super powerful turn there. Not in terms of damage done, but prepping for his next turn. Trey uses Supreme Intelligence Global to move his Atlantis over. Trey takes 2 damage. Sorry, takes 3 damage, down to 15 from the Shriek attacking. See if Trey can put together a big Atlantis turn here. Do it for the fans. He's got plenty of sidekicks rolled. He didn't roll Atlantis or a sidekick. The good news is he does have stuff in his use pile here. He could use the Captain America Global to create a sidekick. Gonna play the fish. Shield plus generic makes a sidekick. Draw and roll 2. Ideally, he'd love Black Widow to come through here and buff his whole field. She is not going to. Got another sidekick, though. Going to be stringing it along. So he can make purchases here first before a potential bag refill, which is really when this team starts to fire off on full cylinders. I mean, 1 Black Widow would, you know, change this from a 5 or 6 attack push, you know, to a 10 attack, 11 attack push for Trey, which is super. One thing to note, though, is that Shriek is not in the field anymore, so Scarlet Witch has regained her text and will prevent a lot of this thrown brick shenanigans from Michael's side. Does field another sidekick, draw and roll 2. He gets one more Atlantis, which I think he'd actually like to be on double energy when that rolls. Does not get the other Black Widow, which is unfortunate. He actually doesn't get either of those to roll. But tons of options here for Trey. The problem with keeping his sidekicks in the field is that they're not available to be rolled for the Atlantis chain. The good news, though, is if he keeps his field fairly large, then those Black Widow's abilities just become that much better. He could go Shriek here himself. He could just start buying Yantees. He could buy another Black Widow. All of those would be helpful. He does get another Yantee, which again further diversifies his bag and makes Michael's Shriek target decision that much harder. Because he could Shriek Yantee, he could Shriek Black Widow. Like, what's the best? He could Shriek Scarlet Witch again. Hard to say. Gonna spend a single bolt to Kate Global. He didn't pull a sidekick, so put it back in the bag. Clayface in 2 bolts. Getting himself set up for maybe a double Supreme Intelligence Global. Nope, gonna spend it on another Yantee. I imagine he will be keeping those 2 shields, though, for Supreme Intelligence next turn. He needs to make sure he's rolling an Atlantis every single turn of the game, which is why that Global's on the team. Michael's going to pull his 4 from the bag, plus the 5 that he had prepped. Unfortunately, didn't get Shriek back. So, any of these thrown bricks that land energy must remain on energy, and any of them that land action side must be part of the reroll. Thanks to Scarlet Witch. This die over here. Tons of sidekicks. Thrown brick on double energy. It must stay that way. His other one is on action, which must be rerolled. Alongside that, 3 sidekicks, 3 bolts, and a shield. So he does get a thrown brick through the Scarlet Witch wall. Had to roll action face twice in a row. Got an additional sidekick, which is actually really strong against Trey's team. Having blockers, that is. Trey's whole strategy is to have a wall big enough to get around his opponent. But that might be when the Yantees come through here. Trey was anticipating Michael buying characters and thus went the Yantee route instead of getting another Black Widow last turn. This is the common Yantee, whose game text reads, Yantee. When you use an action die, your Yantee Pure Blood character dice cannot be blocked. So they will also get the buff from the Black Widow. They will also be unblockable by this swarm of sidekicks that Michael has amassed. Some tricky decisions here. One thing to note that maybe some of us don't know is that the Supreme Intelligence Global can be used on a sidekick die because it has a cost of 2 or less. So these 2 generics that Michael has could be used to prep a die from his use pile. It wouldn't be ultra game-changing, but anytime you can dilute your use pile and get things straight to being rolled next turn is a good idea. He's going to use a single generic for Create Food and Water. He got his Shriek die, so he's definitely throwing that back in the bag. He throws a brick at Scarlet Witch. Does not kill her. He preps a die, which is Shriek again. The other single generic is lost. Trey does use those 2 shields to move that Atlantis over. Again, the whole cornerstone of his team is roll an Atlantis or 2 every single turn. Here's Atlantis plus 3 sidekicks. We'll see what kind of luck we can get. Oh, what a great roll. What a great roll here for Trey. The other good news is there's 3 Yantees in Trey's bag. So when he fields this sidekick, he could potentially pull one or two Yantees, which after using using Atlantis would be unblockable. Sorry. He's going for a second sidekick. Didn't get it, but he still has a shield, shield in generic, which is good in terms of Captain America Global. He does get one Yanti here from his 2 additional dice that does not decide to roll on character face. Pays 1 bolt to create food and water. He gets a Black Widow, which he'd like to keep in the bag. Again, the idea of Trey's team is to keep those sidekicks with the Atlantis. So I imagine we're going to see at least a partial push here of his entire field. I mean, Scarlet Witch has been fairly locked down and clutch already. I can't imagine he'd attack with her. Trey decides to spend 2 on Michael's last thrown brick, which is going to be more fuel for Yanti Atun, as well as making her unblockable, as well as just another way to get as many dice rolled on one turn as possible. So he fields the Black Widow. Everything that was in the field prior to her gets a +1 attack. So those sidekicks are pushing with a 2-1 stat line. I believe the Black Widow is on her 2-2 side. So Black Widow and a sidekick getting through, which is 4 damage to Michael. Trey's on the board. It is 15-16. Michael has a Boom Boom out. Must have slipped that one under the radar. I don't even remember him buying that. But this is when his team really comes together. This Shriek here could be fairly game-changing in terms of blanking this Scarlet Witch. But like I said, at this point, you know, it's going to be a pretty big decision here whether he chooses to blank that or Black Widow or Yanti. Again, there's 2 Yantis in Trey's bag that we know of. I imagine he's going to use these 2 energies in his reserve to Supreme Intelligence over the Atlantis. So it's really just going to come down to rolls for Trey next turn. Boom Boom and Scarlet Witch did not roll character face. He's going to try again. Didn't get either one. That is huge. That is hugely unfortunate for Michael. He does get his thrown brick through again, even though he had to re-roll it. Shriek is fielded. I think he's pondering his Shriek target because we haven't seen Trey indicate what's going on just yet. I imagine he picked Scarlet Witch there. Buys another Boom Boom for 2. Supreme Intelligence that over for next turn. So we're definitely going to get a Boom Boom next turn here out of Michael's prep area. I'm trying to imagine where his thrown bricks are going to be when that comes around. Are they going to be in bag? Are they going to be in used pile? Scarlet Witch takes 1 from the thrown brick. Michael preps a die. And Atlas Global to add an additional die to his prep. So many dice per turn. They just haven't been rolling much for Michael. That's unfortunate. He has also bought this blue action here, which is Bolt or Drill. It's going to be used as a removal piece for Scarlet Witch. Trey's got to get a sidekick and Atlantis in order to make this work. This really could be a huge turn if all of his characters roll. 3 missed character rolls and Atlantis. But if all of these land, that is gross. Oh my. That's pretty good. Not the best luck, but it was much better than his initial roll. I know Michael's over here very jealous of Trey's rolls currently because his last turn was fairly poor as well. This is why we play dice games, folks. Gonna field Yanti first. Because again, once she's active, when you use an action, she becomes unblockable. She also gets to deal an attune damage here from Atlantis. I would assume he'd want to remove a blocker. Yep, looks that way. The game plan being, get wider than my opponent and sneak some damage through that's been buffed by Black Widow. Pays 2 to field a sidekick, gonna draw and roll 2. Thank you, Captain America. He's gonna pull another Atlantis and a sidekick. Let's see if he can roll another sidekick face. That would be delusional. He does get another Atlantis, which will stack, meaning when he fields this next sidekick, he will draw and roll 4 dice. Also another attune damage there to kill another sidekick. This turn is getting grosser and grosser by the second. He gets another Yanti. Now, missing that Black Widow roll isn't super terrible because he still has the fist pump on his team. One thing to note is that second Yanti, if my understanding is correct, is not... it is. Your Yanti Pureblood character dice cannot be blocked. So, because one was active when Atlantis was used, they are both unblockable. Trey's going to do some quick maths here. Everything in the field also received that +1 buff thanks to Black Widow. If I'm counting it right, it's going to be 15 damage, which is 1 off of killing Michael. I think in terms of Trey's game plan, though... Oh, maybe I misinterpreted. Some thrifty usage of the fist pump here. Okay, it was 15 without the rest. Yeah, Trey explaining right now that his entire bag is now in his use pile, which is never where you want to be. It's going to come down to Michael's rolls, which we haven't seen his best rolls yet this game. Michael, on the other hand, rolling so many dice because of his skillful prepping with globals and such. He will have to reroll both of those actions, but he does get a Boom Boom out, which is going to be huge in terms of actually starting his damage downpour on Trey. Getting the second Boom Boom is not all that critical. In fact, her fielding costs are fairly high. I imagine he could either go for it or try... he could either go for the reroll or just leave it the way it is. They're both good options. Going to go for the reroll. Unfortunately, downgrades. Man, unfortunate roll there. Shriek not coming up. The Shriek target, would have been a slightly easier decision now that one of the Black Widows is already in the field. Especially at 1 health, you're really just trying to get like the Yanti blanked so that you don't die to 1 attune damage or something silly. Michael in a tough spot here. He reaches for a Mimic, which could copy Trey's Yanti and make for more attune, which would be cool. Not sure if that's his exact plan, but it has options. 4 more energy to spend. He does have to pay at least 1 fielding cost here for Boom Boom. Can't see for sure if Scarlet Witch requires a tax or not. I think she's on her level 2 face at 033. Really some unfortunate rolls for Michael. Missed his Shriek 2 or 3 times in a row. So Boom Boom's in the field, though. Things are looking up. We also have an action die, which is going to deal some damage to Trey. Throws a brick at Scarlet Witch. Does get to prep an additional die. And because of Boom Boom's ability, Trey takes 2. So Michael has 2 blockers. Trey needs 1 character to get through. He also has an action plus Yanti, which could be enough attune damage to kill Michael. I think that's it, though. 2 sidekicks roll, and that is the game. Shoo, what a match between 2 titans. It was the buffed sidekick Wall of Doom versus the Hope Boom Boom. Unfortunate rolls for Michael, but great game to watch. Super fun times. Congrats to both players. We are going to move into round 3 of Swiss, but if you've enjoyed the coverage thus far, please hit some of these social media outlets or like, comment, subscribe this video. We will be back soon with round 3. It's Ross from the Weekly Dice Arena. We out.